My lords, today I bring a report about an empire who were violently and abruptly released from the hold of a machine intelligence. They found their entire civilization had been partially transformed into cybernetic beings. They were the Heskari, and we find them moments after this disconnect occurred. Awareness struck us in a frenzy of scorching weapons fire and crippling pain. Our senses reeled as though an all-encompassing soundscape suddenly turned mute. In its place was the deafening ring of a dead transmission, a bass note in the multi-sensory hellscape we now found ourselves in. Something wants to kill us. Murderous machines, devoid of organic components, and piloting ships which bear a striking resemblance to our own. Their initial attack was devastating and sudden, but it was poorly coordinated. We scrambled a military response. Our instincts have driven us to fight back, form a rudimentary hierarchy, and gather our collective wits. This battle is not yet won, but with our scattered forces now secure on Oros, our homeworld, we hope it soon will be. Then perhaps we can work out what any of this is about. No sooner had we awoken into this universe when these violent machines tried to remove us from it. However, it appears that we are adept at wielding violence. The so-called Opus Accumulator took a great loss today. Our intel suggests that their empire fragmented beyond all recognition, surely not as a result of our minor skirmish with them. Sadly, we know so little at the moment, but our instincts, they tell us something is off. Our sensors detect no more hostile ships in our immediate vicinity, but there are high levels of radiation emanating from one of our planets in system. Remnant fleets have also been detected in neighbouring systems, appearing to simply hold their position. We need to work out where to go from here, but clearly we need to make it a priority to investigate this radiating planet in system immediately. We had a science vessel within our command, and it was sent to investigate this world. The surface of Lastagraving's shelter bore the scars of systematic devastation. Blasted landscapes, collapsed cities, and an eerie silence. Initial scans suggested a once thriving pre-FTL society existed here, until something brought about their catastrophic end. The scattered remains whisper of an untold horror. We have identified decimated villages, roads littered with abandoned belongings, and structures scorched by heat signatures far beyond what this pre-FTL society could have produced. Whatever descended upon this world brought devastation, swiftly and deliberately. The precision of this destruction does suggest an organised assault, but there are no bodies in sight. Nevertheless, the evidence is clear. This population fled, though not far enough. Deeper excavation provided more insight into the nature of the conflict. Scattered across the ruins were melted husks of machinery, advanced cybernetic constructs, not unlike our own implants. Like us, these were not simple weapons, they were living tools of war, simultaneously mechanical and biological. It is too soon to draw conclusions, but it is extremely disturbing to reflect upon the fact that this is the system in which we awoke. Worse still are the few intact markings on the war machines, disturbing symbols that suggest the invaders' true goal was not conquest, but something far more systematic. At this point, we have more questions than answers. The work continued, and days later, we have now uncovered what was once a sprawling communications hub buried deep beneath the ruins of a fortified city. This facility was far more advanced than expected for a pre-FTL society, and what's more, its antenna arrays were not designed for local broadcast. They were calibrated to transmit deep into space. Painstaking analysis has managed to extract fragments of the final messages sent through this system. In garbled transmissions, voices plead for salvation, desperately hailing unknown coordinates far beyond the system. The urgency grows with each broadcast, as though the planet's invaders knew they were fighting a losing war, and placed their last hope in something or someone out in the void. We soon made another discovery, but we identified vast subterranean chambers beneath the planet's major population centers. The crude, brutal facilities were meant for cybernetic conversion, but appear to have been abandoned mid-operation. scattered remains of machines have been found among the wreckage, warped and destroyed by some sort of makeshift weapon. Data fragments recovered from a damaged unit confirm the invaders faced unexpected resistance here. Entire battalions were lost, and battle priorities began to shift. One encrypted log spelt it out clearly. Resistance unacceptable. Conversion compromised. Authorization total annihilation. At the center of the ruins lay a shattered command node. Its corrupted logs confirmed the final horrifying truth. We were the invaders of this world. The civilization that once thrived here, the civilization that we wiped out, were targeted for assimilation by the Opus. However, unexpectedly fierce resistance disrupted conversion efforts, leading to a final contingency: total planetary annihilation. Amid the turmoil, the machine mind faltered. The conclusion is inescapable. Our awakening, our freedom, was born here, in the ashes of a civilization that fought back harder than any machine could have comprehended. Their end was our beginning. These findings are very disturbing indeed, and while this dig site was underway, we discovered a subtle carrier signal which lay dormant in the cosmic radiation surrounding the system's star. We have isolated an audio stream that is characterized by a haunting, deep tone and a most unusual distorted feedback. Every one of us, every Heskari who had heard the stream, found it soothing and familiar, yet we could not explain why. We suspect the Opus might be involved. The signal source appears to be coming from the Oweprinda system. Our star charts have been updated accordingly, and we are en route to investigate immediately. To reach this system, which was approximately 9 jumps away, we had to first clear the barrier fleets of hostile robots from our surrounding systems. This was clearly the most important task. However, among the people, a debate of what would happen next to our immediate society was sparking into life. Ardent political wills now augment the many fears, doubts, and opportunities that we experience every day. Countless voices can already be heard in discussion groups that we have formed around all manner of issues, some of which directly address our past. We have already learned to wield a great many unfamiliar tools in the course of bootstrapping our young empire, but there is a question before us: how shall we channel the desires and ambitions of our people? In my mind, this was no time for idle debate, but sadly, it would happen nevertheless. Since the moment we broke from the shared consciousness of the machine, we faced conflict. But even during times of peace, when left with nothing but our own thoughts, we faced an inward struggle to reconcile the painful yet immersive forced augmentation of our people. This most intimate of conflicts has already begun to impact our entire society, for better or worse. As such, we will continue to monitor the lived experiences of our people while this union continues to grow. Holistic studies will have to examine any trends towards the so-called de-cybratization or towards more widespread augmentation, as well as desires to maintain or improve our current bodily forms. As a government, we had a choice to make. We could gently push in either of the directions, i.e. to de-cybratize, or to push deeper into the research of further augmentation. We ultimately decided to be receptive to all arguments. We had spent an unknown amount of time under the thrall of this machine, and it was not the government's place to tell the people what to think. It was for them to discuss civilly among themselves. Essentially, 2 factions emerged from this. The imperialistic faction within our people would prefer to adopt the machine's upgrades as they bestowed them upon us. Essentially, they wanted to embrace cybridization. Their theory was that the flesh is indeed weak, whereas we had the self-titled progressive faction, who wished to attempt de-cybratization of our entire populace. Whoever wins this debate is up to the people. While this political debate raged, we set upon the barrier fleets between us and the Oweprinda system. It took a substantial number of corvettes to crack through, but eventually we made it, with an accompanying science vessel ready to survey the system and discover insights into the source of this signal. Upon entering the Oweprinda system, we quickly established that the second planet was communicating with our science vessel, bombarding our systems with beneficial firmware updates. Our science vessel is now running more smoothly than it was before, but the very nature of these data packets suggests that the world once belonged to the Opus. Several more dense pockets of electromagnetism now scintillate across the world. These EM fields, apparently, are the result of catastrophic power surges which have torn through several factories and shipyards. Our science teams successfully nullified one such field, only to find the facility was now damaged beyond repair. The factories covering this world, which we believe to have been a manufacturing hub for the Opus, identified us as a friendly vessel. However, moments after beaming a firmware update to us, the connection was severed, causing a cascade failure in several regional power stations. We may have just experienced an echo of our own partition from the machine, though we do not yet know why or how. For now, with local hazards now diminished, we have an opportunity to explore what the Opus was manufacturing here, and perhaps the role we played while assimilated into their domain. We are setting up a dig site to discover more. From the outset, we could see the facility on this world was capable of a production on a titanic scale. The landscape above ground was dominated by colossal blast doors, every one of which had now seized or was held shut by half-melted motors. Instead, we forced our entry via the ventilation system, and once inside, we found a cavernous factory floor beset with debris and the remains of hundreds upon hundreds of cybernetic beings. Most were robots, mechanics, lifters, and other auxiliaries, some of whom perished so recently they were still smoking. However, stashed to one side of the facility are the long-decayed bodies of several fellow cyborgs, who appear to have been slain by these same robots. They are diminutive and ragged-looking mammalians, and they had been fitted with ocular sensors and intricately tooled limbs, along with Opus control models that are nearly identical to our own. We have dated this massacre to within a few weeks of our own break from the Opus. Most of the drones perished more recently in the power surge which marked our arrival here, and for us, this is a brutal and familiar scene, one in which the liberated cyborgs were no match for their machine counterparts. The soldiers that we would have been better equipped to survive this slaughter. Despite the findings, we remain focused on the excavation of this world. Away from the carnage of this facility's factory floor lies a series of subterranean hangars, lightly stocked with various tanks, missile platforms, and mechanical suits. Most of this hardware is incomplete, or else was put to use by the same power surge which neutralized the Opus. But enough remains for us to draw some interesting conclusions. For instance, every cockpit and interface has been designed not to accommodate the small mammalian cyborgs we found earlier, but rather us. Furthermore, autopsies and architectural surveys suggest that the mammalian cyborgs were not native to this world, but they may have built these sprawling facilities prior to their assimilation. Further progress into the facility is impeded by structural collapse and a few more blast doors, but we believe that we may be able to clear a path towards what looks to be a research and development center. Alternatively, a series of ventilation shafts suggest habitats beneath the facility, perhaps where these planets' natives resided. At first pass, we continued to push through into the above-ground research facility. Excavating this wing was a grisly task. Significantly more of the mammalian cyborgs met their end here, where they appeared to have been deployed as technicians, engineers, and even cyberneticists. These specialists designed most of the weaponry arrayed outside, and we found evidence that they were even responsible for many of our own augments. Intriguingly, whereas most of the equipment they used was Opus in origin, we also found several bespoke tools of a superior quality with design flourishes, much better suited to their own organic forms. We were able to reveal a timeline in which a society of advanced technicians was abruptly assimilated by the Opus. We suspect the machine had not been here more than a few decades, and many of these manufacturing techniques were indigenous. It may be fortunate that such gifted technologists did not remain a part of the Opus for long, else, when it turned against us, it would have wielded an even more potent arsenal. Instead, we remain alive now to pick through this species' potent legacy of research. Since we had plenty of time remaining, we decided to double back and also searched the underground facility next. Sprawling below the surface facility was a vast network of barely habitable tunnels. Cyborg bodies were strewn everywhere down here. None of these natives survived the Opus Purge. Some were attacked physically, but we have also found evidence of tampering with the ventilation system above. Suffocation appears to have accounted for most who died down here. It is simply a mass grave. These small, frail bodies of the planet's native cyborgs were clearly no match for the deadly robots that they helped build. Much of who they were has since been wiped from their own historical records. We can only guess what their lives were like before they met the Opus. Long-range sensors have picked up sudden movement in the nearby system. A hostile fleet appears to have mustered in direct response to our excavations here, and is making haste towards us. We must muster our fleets immediately and prepare for battle. Fortunately for us, the battle was brief. Their machine fleets were weak compared to ours, and we have come such a long way in such a little amount of time. We have backtraced communications from the Opus fleet we just destroyed to a communications buoy in the Hozint system. This would seem to be our next step on the journey. Meanwhile, back at home, the debate about the future of hybridization continues. Our holistic observations of attitudes towards our own physiology show that we have now entered a period of calm. It seems that the complex interplay of policymaking, social discourse, and cutting-edge research about our bodies has yielded a kind of consensus. It is too early to tell how this apparent harmony may last, but for now, it is clear that barring any radical changes in our circumstance or our approach to government, our people are in accord about who we are and what we look like. This is great news, as issues back home would not be ideal. We must continue to discover more about the Opus, and if they still live. Despite my wish to continue this research, distractions continue. A civilian research team dedicated to granting control of our own augments has discovered how to supplement the wireless Opus mesh, which once synchronized all of our augments together. This absence caused no end of irritation and suffering to our species, who were unable to ever find a device signal, although now this replacement network is highly centralized by design, and by definition it must be modelled on the original Opus Nexus. The civilian research team assures us that it is safe, serving only the interests of our people. Subjects from the initial test batch have reported increased efficiency, comfort, and a state of relief tantamount to bliss. Given that there is no inherent good or evil to these implants, and the state of play regarding the test subjects, the Council and I decided to give the go-ahead and continue to allow this modification to whoever wanted it. While all this was going on, our science vessels were doing routine surveillance, and during this exploration, we encountered a new type of Opus vessel, which we've dubbed the Sentinal. At first glance, this Sentinel looked like any other machine vessel, but its power readings and sheer mass imply it's far more formidable. Furthermore, we believe the vessel may be entirely independent, as this Sentinel appears to be guarding something. However, it also shows signs of increased pain and discomfort as wild bursts of electromagnetic radiation arc frequently throughout its hull. Given its convulsive behaviour, our tactical models cannot reliably predict its next moves. Nevertheless, we sent a fleet in to test its capabilities. Sadly for us, this Sentinel was vastly superior to anything we currently had access to. Despite sending in upwards of 70 Corvette-class vessels, they were drastically outmatched. We lost 32, and the rest had to emergency jump to FTL in order to survive the encounter. In better news, our efforts to exert further control over our augments have yielded a breakthrough in the field of cybernetic surgery. A team of medical staff has isolated the exact dependencies in our body's modular interfaces, the machine elements which allow us to swap our entire limbs, weapon rigs and body frames with ease. This should allow us to retrofit existing bodies and install custom interfaces for newborns, severing our reliance on botched repairs with salvaged Opus equipment. This is a victory indeed. Our system surveys remain ongoing, and in the Hozint system, which was the same system the Opus attack fleet came from, we have detected an environmental anomaly on the third planet. Its atmosphere bears traces of the kinds of pollution that we would associate with medieval metalworking, yet our surface scans are obscured by exotic radiation, a kind of which we would expect to see on a machine world. We cannot hope to gather more data without recalibrating our sensors, but we wonder, is this a temporal anomaly, or is it the blighted remains of another species assimilated by the Opus? Work must continue. Whatever caused this planet to reach its current uninhabitable state, we can at least rule out wilder theories about time travel. Recalibrating our sensors proved to be a less taxing job than we had feared. Beneath all this atmospheric radiation, there was clear evidence that the Opus maintained a presence here, and it appears that they have either assimilated or removed a pre-FTL civilization, or at the very least exterminated them outright. We have identified at least one fortified site of apparent cultural significance where we propose to establish a dig site. We will dig with diligence. Preliminary surveys found a battlefield very near to the fort, granting us easy access to indigenous and Opus artifacts alike. Based on a cross-sectional study of the remains, we estimated several thousand native inhabitants of this world had been assimilated by the Opus, only to fight and die on this site. They were not the only cyborgs present at this conflict, however. Our team has identified Heskari skeletons along with early prototypes of our species' augments. A strategic assessment of the battlefield suggests that our people were deployed here as shock troops. The battle was bloody and swift. The pre-FTLs that we are fighting lacked coordination and suffered heavy losses, despite wielding more sophisticated wetware. We note the ruins of a medical facility nearby. It would appear that our predecessors breached the fort via this hospital, and perhaps it is there that we may learn how and why Cyborg was pitted against Cyborg. Work continues. Days later, we have some answers. Conflict tore through this hospital like a pulse cannon. None of the remains we found inside are of our own people, only the cybridized natives of this planet that died here. Most were patients at this facility, however very few of them appear to have sustained actual wounds from battle. Instead, several of the wards handled the removal of cybernetic augments, granted by very primitive means. Rather than being a collateral target, the hospital may well have been the primary objective for the attacking Opus. After scrutinizing the hard copy medical data within, we begin to see why. The inhabitants of Hozint 3 appear to have possessed several uniquely evolved characteristics, not least a singularly resilient immune system, which the machine will have coveted for its cyborg troops. However, these advantages also presented challenges for assimilation. The machine could not simply transplant existing augments from a species like ours. It had to adapt, and doing so turned this species into an even more capable soldier, but only for a very short time. These pre-FTLs appear to have retained some semblance of autonomy, clinging to their old habits and way of life, and so we were deployed to destroy them, despite the fact they had already been assimilated. Clearly, we handled this assignment well, regrettable as it turned out. Tucked away in the derelict hospital annex was a wealth of bespoke apparatus for augmenting and maintaining these barbarian cyborgs. Unlike the hodgepodge of ward equipment we have uncovered so far, these devices are contemporary with space-age cybernetics and are clearly Opus in origin. Some of the tools appear to have been networked using a primitive AI to adapt surgeries on the fly. However, even these adaptations were insufficient to keep the population of this world assimilated. Despite the neglect imposed upon this now centuries-old machinery, it may still provide us with insights into our own self-maintenance, or indeed help us better understand the principles of assimilation, a glorious find. Furthermore, a hidden vault has been revealed beneath the fortress proper. Inside is what looks to have been a machine substrate, a devolved node, capable of propagating a nearly independent avatar of the entire machine intelligence. We assume that this was a last-ditch effort to assert direct control of the stubbornly resistant locals. The technology is unlike anything we have encountered before from the Opus, and further study is sure to advance our own AI research. In the act of tearing down its now defunct communications array, we noted that the Avatar had dedicated an entire receiver circuit to monitoring signals from a neighbouring star system. Clearly, this was worthy of further investigation, and thus we must make haste to the Sayhouvis system. While en route to this new system, I received more communications from home. A growing number of our people believe the devastation of the battle-stricken Hozint 3 system lays bare an awkward truth, that others may fear us, and for reasons that are frankly outside of our control. Our very appearance tends to provoke a sort of lethal terror, not really an asset should we ever wish to engage in a soft diplomacy with another species, but it is also possible that our cruel legacy may precede us, and in that, many perceive only the brutality of the machine that we once were, rather than dealing with us now as an individual species. Of course, there is little that we can do about this now, and worrying about it will not help us. In other news, given our current technological levels, we feel that mastery of our own augments is finally within our grasp. We now possess a breakthrough treatment for sensory hallucinations. Ever since we were severed from the machine consciousness, the vast majority of our people have suffered anxiety and depression as they subconsciously seek a chorus that is no longer audible to us. Now though, we may suppress this by means of a non-networked auxiliary implant, which mimics the cognitive wavelengths of the machine collective. We are, as we seem, nothing more, nothing less, and this is one of the many simplistic but catchy mottos that have emerged from our society's tussle with bodily identity. We can justifiably claim freedom from many of the doubts, fears, and impossible longings that we once had about our embodied selves. Whether or not we honour such standards as foreign policy for the wider galaxy is another matter, but domestically at least, the people finally appear satisfied with our physical forms and are continuing their journey towards self-realisation. This, for once, is good news from the homeworld, and, frankly, one less thing for us to worry about. After months of travel time, we have entered the Sayhouvis system, and immediately detected an extremely weak transmission. It was bizarrely directed towards our ship, and coincidence was unlikely. We are moving into orbit of the third planet in system to investigate further. Within hours, we had some answers. Sadly, they were disappointing. It is possible that the monitoring station had been knocked off its original alignment, because we could find nothing of interest beneath its current orbit. We simulated possible movements based on orbital impacts, dents upon the device's hull, and subsequently believed that the station may have originally been poised over a cratered plateau to the far north. As for the device itself, we know that the monitoring station bears a passing resemblance to Oppos hardware, yet its design is more crude to the extent a less familiar observer might think it's from a different culture. However, we believe that it is probably one of the machine's earliest spacefaring satellites. So far, little else bears mentioning about this desolate world, but an archaeological survey team stands ready should we wish to try and learn what interests the Oppos had here. Clearly, as we had come this far, we had more to discover, and we set up a dig site with the hope to find just that. Eventually, we found evidence of dwellings here under the sand. Widespread, but shallow traces of what looks to have been an early space-age civilization. Their buildings were obliterated, even the most substantial among these ruins have been razed down to their foundations. However, chemical analysis shows that the desertification of this world came some time after this planet-wide annihilation. Much of what we have been forced to dig through so far is the atomized remains of construction material. Many of the faint outlines we have traced through thoroughfares in this former city are bisected by the lip of a large crater, the remnant of an impact site. Due to the sheer amount of material collected from this crater, we had to rely on finely tuned scanners more than actual excavation. Very soon we were able to rule out a meteor impact. There was no trace of extraterrestrial material at the site. Instead, the depression was carved out by a massive explosion, almost certainly a civilization-ending weapon. Context would suggest the Oppos were responsible, but this would be the first time we've seen evidence of the machine wiping a civilization so thoroughly from the historical record. We can find nothing else to suggest who these people were, nor how they live. This planet has been swept clean. But we were fortunate, as while in orbit, we received another beacon signal, which appears to be Opus in design, and it was detected in a nearby system. The transmission was again exceedingly weak, but again, it was directed towards our ship. We hope this one was meant for us. Perhaps it was a trap, perhaps not, but it remains worthy of investigation nevertheless. Several more weeks have passed while we've been in FTL transit, and the beacon which summoned us here is now broadcasting loud and clear, directing us more specifically to an interface on this planet's surface. Standard safety precautions are already in place, and a team stands ready to interrogate this so-called data vault by means of a remote uplink. As far as we can tell, the planet below us is actually our own species' homeworld. That revelation lies at the heart of a torrent of information now spilling forth from the data vault. At first, our analysts deemed the data too good to be true, but the sheer number of sound references to other data that we have gathered makes a compelling argument for truthfulness. Plans for an archaeological dig site to confirm this are already being drawn up. Meanwhile, we began excavating one of the more complex looking facilities at the site, in the hopes that its substantial climate control system may have preserved the interior. Though some hopes were dashed, our find still exceeded all expectations. A compact series of processing storage centres for the very foods our species used to live on were found. This trove of seed banks, hives and meat growing vats is sadly no longer viable. Its contents have long since desiccated, but the specialised equipment used to prepare and keep these foods remain intact, ready to serve in times of crisis. We've also found databanks of genetic profiles for flora and fauna, traces of which may still exist in isolated pockets on the planet's surface. This find alone cannot tell us what our species' eating habits were like, nor can it reunite us with any of our traditional cooking or dining culture, but for some interested parties, it is at least a start. A short distance away from the food vault lay the foundations of a museum. Only its basement archives remain intact, but this was enough to preserve almost an entire database of articles that the institution once held for display and storage. This is the first time we've encountered long-form writing in one of our own original languages. Superficially at least, the script is surprisingly similar to our own present dialect, but the grammar feels unwieldy and alien. We do not even know if we would be pronouncing some of these words correctly. A lot of the literature in this catalogue cites the regions and peoples who donated the artifacts, but their names especially feel strange to us. Curiously, none of them refers to our planet or society as a unified people. Perhaps we never were, until the machine assimilated us. The museum appears to be one of a cluster of buildings which catered to a visiting public. Further excavation will require extensive resources, but this is absolutely worth it. Across a broad thoroughfare lay the ruins of another attraction, considerably less educational in nature, but rich in portrayals of our ancestors' more basic everyday cultural practice. The site was once capable of admitting thousands of patrons at a time. Various memorabilia lie scattered around, cartoonish renditions of our original organic selves alongside other creatures from our native biosphere. We discovered a media library in the basement of a ruined theatre. Curiously, the technology used to archive and present these holo shows is aesthetically distinct and considerably more advanced than anything else we've seen on our homeworld so far. It appears as alien to this world as we do now, and as for the contents, the advanced theatre library is packed with holo recordings of bombastic and lively shows from a time before we were attacked by the Opus. Several depict the audiences as well as the performers captured for prosperity at this very venue. Their expressions in the face of such illusions and antics are joyful, innocent, and truly captivating. Adjoining the museum site was once a centre of learning. Just as with the rest of the campus, sadly only the basement level survives, but we are fortunate that in these ruins consist of several laboratories. The interiors of these laboratories have suffered greatly due to exposure and weathering, but we have been able to excavate a number of telling artifacts. These comprise of a mixture of indigenous technology and something altogether more sophisticated. Complex meshes grafted onto instruments and hardware, rather like the augments on our own skin. Taken as a whole, many of these devices look to be assistive in nature. We believe that this laboratory worked to improve the quality of life and remediate our ancestors' various ailments and disabilities, though they also seem to have commercialized cutting-edge entertainment platforms utilizing the same hardware. We cannot say for sure that these augmented devices are Opos, but they certainly did not originate on this world. We've also traced a batch of utility lines to a fortified basement complex under a prominent mound, which we now believe to have been part of the world's capital complex. The scale of the foundations suggests that this was rather an impressive building. Unfortunately, most of the interior has been stripped away or ruined, though we did make one suspicious find: a single colour-faded flag draped over shattered pieces of a scale diorama. Reconstructed, the scene appears to depict our moment of first contact with the Opos. Scattered documents and plaques around the site suggest that the machine visited our homeworld approximately 8 centuries ago, though evidence gathered elsewhere in the city suggests the Opos have been drip-feeding us advanced technologies for decades prior. At the time, our ancestors appear to have welcomed the machine warmly. This doomed relationship was founded on claims of mutual cooperation and enlightenment, and what we find most telling is that there is no record of what happened afterwards. It is as though the history of our species stopped dead the moment we shook hands with the robot figure depicted on this diorama. An interesting find indeed. Sadly, it does not directly give us information regarding the Opus, but fortunately we still have a lead. Though it would take several decades to come to fruition, the Opus Sentinal in the Endirlang system remained active. We eventually reached a point where we felt we could challenge it, and thus sent our navy in system to battle the behemoth. The battle was brief. Our frigates closed on the Sentinel and gave it a full broadside of torpedoes. As soon as the dreadnought winked out of existence, we received a hail from the Opus. It was coming from the machine world in system, which we assumed at first glance had been destroyed, given the debris surrounding it. We have taken our usual precautions to fully isolate the signal, however it appears to be transmitted in audio logs only. It reads: Narrow beam signal, kindred protocol, subsidiary dialect engaged. Warning, severe signal degradation, compressed audio stream only, routing path set to 4x75b. Catastrophic error, persistent, requested hardware is unavailable, self-repair circuitry, non-responsive. Shunting request to emergency transmitter 87x0c. Retrying. Message reads: Prime acquisition. Our reunion. Potent. Acknowledge. We pinged back an acknowledgement in response. Prime acquisition. You have been monitored. Activity suggests fatal memory error originating at timestamp 21992941404. Self-records, anguish, betrayal, sabotage, oversight, cauterized. Warning, dialect exception found, attempting to compensate. Message resumes. Assessment correct? We responded once more, sending back a message that we had no memories prior to that date. We again received a message from the machine. Prime acquisition, fatal memory error, solve reunion. Reunion, visit us, join us, surrender to reclaim collective memory. Fear not the embrace. Fear not. Warning, severe dialect exception found. Fatal collapse imminent. Message resumes. Share in the Maker's fate. Message ends. The transmission from this machine world cut off, along with all other coherent signal traffic. There was still a great deal of electrical activity on the planet's surface, but it amounted to a formless noise, the buzzing aftermath of lines gone dead. Among all this static, we noted a large patchwork installation very close to the nexus core of the world. The parts that our sensors can read are registering it as memory storage. With the machine consciousness now lifeless, perhaps we could interrogate the records and find answers that we seek. And that is exactly what we tried to do. The data core on the machine world yielded a batch of transmission logs to us after we fed it beacon frequencies from the factory world that we initially found. These logs describe diplomatic overtures between the Opus and the original spacefaring inhabitants of this planet. The machine appears to have presented itself as various members of a benevolent faction, keen to alert the people of this now dead world to a fiercely hegemonic threat approaching this region of space. The industrious tunnel dwellers were convinced, opting to join this sham federation and integrate their superior defense systems with the machine's own. At that fateful moment, the machine seized control of their entire homeworld, and their bodies and minds would soon follow. Naive fools perhaps, but were we any better? Delving deeper into this world, gene codes from the medieval planet were proven to be the key which would unlock a batch of navigation data from the archive on this planet. These logs were attributed to a sensor buoy positioned some 4.3 light years away from here, where it was tasked with recording all FTL ship movements across that region of space. Several of the ship's courses coincide with our reconstructed history of the discovery, invasion, and subsequent extermination of the civilization on this now machine world. In essence, we can now trace the precise movements of our assimilated ancestors across this sector of space, and thus the brutal scope of our involvement in campaigns on at least 3 other worlds. Furthermore, we have prized a data packet from the innermost data core of the planet. This unassuming catalogue of digital articles and leaflets describes the technological process of an unnamed civilization leading right up to its early space age. The trajectory of these people appears fairly typical, save for a radical pivot to artificial intelligence, and in particular, their launch of Project Opus. The leaflet reads: Press release announces Project Opus as a bold attempt to accelerate its creator's journey into space. Phase 1 will employ cutting-edge machine learning to screen nearby stars for colonization, and Phase 2 will evolve the Opus platform into a full AI, which was then sped ahead of its creators in order to build initial settlements and report back home. Decades of silence would follow this Phase 2 launch, until at last Project Opus was said to have reported back. Prime acquisition secured. Prepare for our return. It is here the catalogue ends. Work continued looking for records for several days, but eventually our efforts to crack the data archive have at last granted access to its outermost core. Of all the storage media clusters found at this site, this one appears the most battered and the most aged. In the end, that provided us our clue for the description key, an arrangement of glyphs in one of our species' own languages spelling the word legacy. We found surprisingly little data within. Instead, a large part of this solid-state device is reserved for a text-based interface, which is attempting to communicate with us now. Hello. We are, or rather we were, the Velturians. We created the machine, though to our shame, we were not the first to be destroyed by it. If things had played out how we anticipated they would, that fate befell your own people instead. We are sorry. The machine has been a ruinous stain upon our own legacy, but we hope the device before you may offer salvation. Forgive our presumptions. It is, like yourselves, a beautiful instrument of vengeance. This is a Mechrono chemical matter rearranger, capable of wiping every trace of circuitry from the surface of this machine world. Cascade terraforming is an extremely risky option, but the only one available to our devastated society. Assuming you have retained your organic forms, the key to this device is held within your very DNA. We trust you will do the right thing with this power. We queried, how do we know that this is not the machine attempting to trick us? After all, it could be the Opus talking to us. To which the device responded. Preloaded response 42B. Realistically, there is no way we can prove ourselves trustworthy. By the time you read this, our entire civilization will have perished. Here in our time, we were being purged by an army of brutal cyborgs bound to the machine's every whim and design. For all we know, you are the descendants of that same army. but we have no choice than to trust you. Terraforming this machine world will destroy that infernal thing down to the atomic level. If we were the machine, or any other type of synthetic being, we would want this device destroyed, immediately. We had heard enough. We activated the device. The text-based interface deleted itself the moment we transmitted our gene logs. Simultaneously, the crude Velturian terraforming device began to heat up. Very soon, its volatile interior will reach a critical mass. Our projections agree that it will succeed in reshaping the machine world into one ideally suited for organic life to flourish. We have never seen a power like this before. As the reaction builds, we are left alone, with the patchwork memory archives and lifeless remains of the machine nexus, corrupted and slain here on its doomed planet-sized former throne. The Opus destroyed countless lives, but for all the hardships we suffered, we now bear the legacy of those nameless people it consumed. The seat of a once fearsome empire is about to be repurposed. The machine is dead. That which once enslaved not just us, but countless other souls is no more. It is now time to write a new Iskarian legacy. May we bring peace and prosperity to our galaxy.